A German infantryman tosses his standard-issue MP-40 aside. The stamped metal clatters against the frozen soil of the ruined city. Stalingrad, 1942. Frontline troops abandoned their state-supplied equipment to survive the street fighting. They picked up the Soviet PPSh-41 instead. While the German submachine gun fired roughly 500 rounds per minute, the captured Soviet weapon delivered over 900. This rate of fire dictated the terms of close-quarters combat inside shattered buildings. The technological edge of the invading army collapsed at the squad level. The advantage shifted to the enemy. That 900 rounds per minute firing rate became a command requirement only after a disaster on a different border. The military leadership planned to conclude the foreign campaign in 2 weeks. Instead, they lost 120,000 men to soldiers on skis. During the 1939 Winter War, the geometry of battle changed. Finnish skiers emerged directly from the deep snow. They emptied a 71-round drum from their Suomi KP-31 submachine guns into the marching units. Then they vanished before the frozen columns could return fire. The sharp scent of burnt powder hung over the snow-covered tracks. The scale of the strategic shock defied basic military logic. 120,000 Soviet soldiers died in the northern forests. Meanwhile, the entire population of Finland in 1939 stood at just about 3,700,000 people. The defeat forced the state to completely rewrite its approach to mass infantry firepower. Generals demanded a mass-produced weapon immediately. Designer Georgy Shpagin understood the looming industrial reality better than the high command. He knew foreign aviation would soon target traditional arms factories. His design was driven by the absolute certainty of losing complex manufacturing capacity. He engineered a weapon for unheated workshops. He chambered it in the fast 7.62 by 25 mm cartridge. He copied the 71-round drum straight from the Finnish combat playbook. But the core difference lay in the manufacturing process. 87 stamped steel parts replaced complex milled components. A tractor plant could press these shapes without specialized tooling. The weapon required minimal machining and could be assembled by teenagers. The State Military Committee signed the official adoption document in late 1940. That signature arrived just 6 months before 3 million German soldiers crossed the border on June 22, 1941. 600,000 Soviet troops surrendered in a single massive encirclement at Kiev alone. The Red Army met the sudden invasion holding bolt-action Mosin rifles from the previous century. German infantry units advanced 48 kilometers a day. They shredded those lines with belt-fed MG-34 machine guns. To survive this rapid territorial collapse, the Soviet government dismantled its entire industrial base. Thousands of factories were loaded onto freight trains piece by piece. They relocated east. The Ural Mountains kept them safely beyond the maximum range of enemy bombers. The new assembly lines restarted directly on bare dirt floors. The outer factory walls were not even built yet. Winter temperatures in late 1941 plummeted to -30 degrees Celsius. Factory workers handled the freezing steel sheets with bare hands. Heavy presses stamped the cold metal into crude, functional weapon components. The sheet metal design bypassed complex milling. It allowed a completely evacuated workforce to flood the collapsing front lines with automatic fire. Output scaled from mere thousands to tens of thousands per month. The final production count reached exactly 6 million. Those millions of newly stamped weapons flooded the forward trenches, just as the nature of the war shifted. A single Soviet infantryman, holding one heavy drum magazine, became an autonomous firing point. The German army pushed into Stalingrad in August 1942. They anticipated the same rapid territorial collapse seen throughout the summer offensive. Instead, they plunged into 5 months of dense urban attrition. Thick, pulverized brick dust choked the ruined basements, making every breath scrape the lungs. Traditional infantry tactics fractured. Standard Soviet apartment corridors measured exactly 1.2 meters wide. This architectural layout created a perfect funnel for blind, concentrated fire. The German MP-40 fired 500 rounds per minute using a 32-round magazine. The Soviet PPSh-41 delivered over 900 rounds from a massive 71-round drum. A German assault pioneer kicked down a splintered door. He fired 3 short bursts. His magazine clicked empty. The Soviet soldier on the opposite side did not pause to aim. He simply hosed the confined room with lead, dumping 71 bullets in under 5 seconds. Replacing that spent drum with a fresh one required less than 4 seconds. The entire combat distance shrank to the thickness of a single brick wall. The severe deficit of sheer firepower behind those walls forced German frontline officers to ignore strict military regulations. Why did the German army begin to officially standardize captured enemy submachine guns? The underlying reasons were crippled logistics and a severe ammunition shortage inside the pocket. German military doctrine traditionally restricted automatic weapons to squad leaders and assault pioneers. The standard German bolt-action rifle fired just 15 rounds a minute, failing against Soviet urban fire. The official German bureaucracy registered this crude weapon, stamped from sheet metal by Soviet teenagers, under the formal title of MP-717R. Field workshops ran an improvised operation directly behind the frontline trenches. German armorers stripped the captured weapons, removed the original Soviet barrels, and fitted new ones machined for the standard 9mm parabellum cartridge. This specific conversion allowed infantrymen to keep fighting without relying on looted Soviet supply dumps. However, the original Soviet ammunition possessed distinct mechanical advantages. The 9mm parabellum cartridge had a larger diameter but lacked the raw penetrating power of the Soviet counterpart. The original 7.62 by 25mm bullet left the long barrel at roughly 1,600 feet per second. That high-velocity projectile produced a distinct, sharp whistle just before tearing cleanly through cold steel. At close quarters, this fast round easily punched through a standard German combat helmet, dropping the infantryman wearing it. Out of 91,000 starving German soldiers who eventually surrendered, only about 5,000 men survived captivity. More than 1 million civilians froze or starved to death inside the siege ring. While the Sixth Army was surrendering in the ruins of Stalingrad, Soviet industry 1,000 miles to the north operated in total isolation. Leningrad had been cut off from the world by Army Group North since September 1941. Inside the trapped city, survival required a radical approach to warfare. The factories had no coal. They had almost no spare metal. The workforce was slowly dying. In this environment, engineer Alexei Sudayev designed the PPSh-43. He stripped the submachine gun down to bare stamped steel. Sudayev discarded the heavy wooden stock of the standard PPSh. In its place, he installed a crude metal folding mechanism. The cold click of the folding stock locking into position became the defining sound of Leningrad's defense. Production continued even when the daily bread ration for a factory worker dropped to just 250 grams. Exhausted, starving mechanics stamped and riveted the steel parts in freezing workshops. They assembled the guns right on the shop floor. Finished weapons went directly from the assembly line into the hands of reconnaissance teams waiting outside the factory doors. These small, compact guns changed how soldiers fought. A folded PPSh-43 fit easily under a heavy winter coat. Soviet troops carried them through narrow trench networks without snagging on the dirt walls. Reconnaissance units slipped through German lines in the dark, emptying magazines into supply depots and vanishing before dawn. The siege demanded this level of close-quarters violence. The weapon proved so effective that it altered the entire landscape of the Eastern Front. Eventually, the factories built 2 million units of the PPSh-43. The Soviet command stopped relying entirely on traditional bolt-action rifles. Instead, they built a new infantry doctrine around mass automatic fire at close range. The Red Army learned that at distances under 200 meters, sheer volume of fire mattered more than individual accuracy. Entire squads deployed with nothing but submachine guns. They created solid moving walls of lead that overwhelmed defensive positions. The compact design of Sudayev's weapon made this high-density firepower highly mobile. During Operation Bagration in the summer of 1944, these specialized assault units shattered the German center. Heavily armed shock troops spearheaded the final offensives all the way to Berlin. 6 Soviet soldiers kicked the heavy wooden door inward. 2 fragmentation grenades vanished down the dark stairwell. Dust filled the landing. A sergeant stepped forward and hosed the entire space with a 71-round drum magazine. The close-quarters assault doctrine had finally reached the streets of Berlin. By April 1945, 2.5 million Soviet troops pushed into the capital. They faced roughly 1 million German defenders. The clash escalated into the largest urban battle in human history. The city spanned nearly 900 square kilometers of dense infrastructure. Every apartment block required a separate storming operation. Soviet squads moved in tight formations. A submachine gunner walked in the lead, with a grenadier directly behind. But the troops returning fire from the upper floors carried a mirror image of that same Soviet firepower. The Nazi state had signed the Volkssturm Decree back in October 1944. Command intended to draft men up to 60 years old. Yet by the final weeks of the war, the national supply chain had collapsed. State armories had nothing left to issue. Officers handed the last depot reserves directly to 14-year-old boys from the Hitler Youth. Those final reserves included thousands of captured Soviet submachine guns. The Wehrmacht had hoarded them since the Stalingrad campaign. German armorers had rebarreled the weapons to accept standard pistol magazines. Now, the exact same stamped steel fired different caliber rounds on opposite sides of the barricades. The conflict reached a point of mechanical absurdity inside the government district. A teenage German conscript stood in a shattered doorway. He wielded a modified MP-717R. He fed German 9mm ammunition into a captured Soviet frame. A 30-year-old Soviet sergeant rushed the same doorway. He held the original version of the identical weapon. The overlapping roar of automatic bursts echoed off the massive masonry walls of the Reichstag. Assault groups cleared the same narrow staircase 3 or 4 times in a single afternoon. By the time the garrison surrendered on the 2nd of May, the urban combat had killed over 80,000 Soviet soldiers. 100,000 German defenders died alongside them. The crude sheet metal weapon designed in 1940 gathered its final harvest in the ashes of the Reich capital. After the fall of Berlin, Soviet command recognized a simple truth. The pistol cartridge no longer met frontline demands. The submachine gun that stormed the Reichstag would end up in the hands of Chinese volunteers in Korea just 5 years later. Yet, its engineering limits were already obvious. The weapon lost all effectiveness at ranges beyond 200 meters. A standard rifleman lacked fire volume, while a submachine gunner lacked lethal reach. The concept of massed fire needed a new platform. Back in 1943, Soviet engineers analyzed a captured German STG-44. The enemy rifle used a shortened intermediate cartridge. It maintained lethal force at a distance while remaining controllable during sustained fire. The search for a Soviet equivalent took years of testing. Mikhail Kalashnikov, a young tank sergeant recovering from combat wounds, solved the mechanical puzzle. His design was adopted in 1947 as the AK-47. The new assault rifle fired a 7.62 by 39mm cartridge at 600 rounds per minute. The AK-47 weighed 4.3 kilograms. This mass matched a fully loaded PPSh. However, Kalashnikov's weapon provided the precision and lethal range of a standard infantry rifle. It bridged the gap between close-quarters clearing and open field engagements. State arsenals would eventually stamp out over 100 million units worldwide. While the Soviet military transitioned to the new rifle, the older inventory went east. Cargo trains delivered millions of surplus submachine guns to North Korea and China. During the Korean War, Chinese infantry assaulted American defensive perimeters at night. The extreme rate of fire tore through the freezing air. American troops gave the obsolete Soviet weapon a new nickname, calling it the burp gun. Marines remembered that sound.